welcome. I am John Brewer. I am one of the two book series editors. My colleague Neil McLaughlin, who you'll meet shortly. Together, we are book series editors, and we work with Bristol University Press on this series, Public Sociology. We have a very impressive international advisory board. Michael Burrowoy, Craig Calhoun, Francis Fox Piven, John Scott, John Hall. And the rationale for the series is to address some of the public and community engagement initiatives that sociologists are involved in, trying to explore the relationship between sociology and its many publics. And so we aim, in one sense, to focus upon what sociologists do. But behind that is a much grander ambition, in that we want the books in the series to address what sociology is for, and the commitments that sociologists have to enhance our understanding of the social condition and to help people in their ordinary lives. And this event is only in part to introduce the series. It's primarily to launch the books that have appeared or are imminent. And so I will now move to our authors and editors, who will briefly explain the books that they have contributed to the series. And first, I want to introduce Eurig, who's been editor for a book entitled Public Sociology as Educational Practice. And Eurig will introduce himself and the book now.
Thank you very much, John. I hope you can hear me. Yes, I want to introduce you to this book, Public Sociology as Educational Practice, which was published at the end of last year. And the argument of this book is that public sociology constitutes a form of educational practice. It's educational in the sense of a dialogue between, on the one hand, sociological knowledge, and on the other, the knowledge generated in counter-public spheres, as subaltern publics take action against the sources of their exploitation, oppression, or injustice. This dialogical educational practice is in the sense of Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed and the various practices that have built on this approach. It's in the sense that Burrowoy refers to when he says, and I quote, "Between the organic public sociologist and a public is a dialogue, a process of mutual education." And it is educational in the sense of Antonio Gramsci when he wrote, "Every relationship of hegemony is necessarily an educational relationship." So out of these dialogues, new public sociology knowledge and praxis is generated. Thus, the book contains 17 cases involving some 36 contributors, largely, although not entirely, from Scotland. They're cases of pedagogical practice, community education, participatory action research, formal, informal, and non-formal education, working class education, participatory policy development, service learning, community arts, activist ethnography, and critiques of practice. They're produced by and with subaltern counterpublics, by and with sociologists and non-sociologists who nonetheless draw on sociological knowledge. They're located in such diverse contexts as women's aid refuges, trade union industrial action, post-industrial communities, MAD studies, and museums, and with working class adults, children, young people, refugees, students, and activists. And of course, in the university, as well as outside the university, on the edges of the university, and sometimes in opposition to the university. The whole book uses an extended case methodology in which insights from the 17 cases are drawn out into meta-analytical discussions of the nature and role of public sociology and its political possibilities. The cases are organized into 3 sections, each of which is foregrounded with a provocation to which the contributors were invited to respond, and finish with a dialogue where several contributors engage with each other's contributions. The 3 sections focus on publics, knowledges, and practices. In particular, what constitutes the subaltern counterpublic and their public spheres? What kind of knowledges are legitimated through the dual accountability of academic rigor and the material interests of subaltern struggles? And what possibilities are there for practicing public sociology in and against the neoliberal university? I hope you will find it as stimulating as we did in producing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Eurig. I should add that discounts are available on all the books that we are launching today. I'd like now to move to the next book we are launching in the series, which is to be published in July. Written by 2 authors, Mark Carrigan and Lambros Fatsis, and it's entitled The Public and Their Platforms, Public Sociology in an Era of Social Media. So over to you.
Thank you. And I'm a bit jealous that we can't hold up a copy of ours. It looks like it'll be very satisfying to be in the position where you can hold the book, particularly when you've worked on it for such a long period of time. And the book that Lambros and I have written has a long genesis from our conversations about what public sociology is and could be. And in terms of what I brought to the book, it was an attempt to address the question that's plagued me since I began my PhD part-time in 2008, which is the relationship between social media and public sociology. I came to them both at largely the same time. And one of the key threads of my work since then is to understand the relationship between them. It can seem obvious that there is going to be some relationship between them because these social platforms, whether we're talking about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or newer and perhaps smaller platforms, they offer free, instantaneous, and immediate access to what are seemingly vast audiences around the world. And they have the promise of allowing immediate engagement outside of traditional structures and without relying on the intermediaries who tend to be involved when academics communicate with the non-academic world. And because of this, we saw an increasingly loud chorus of voices over the 2010s saying that social media could play a crucial role in building a more open and engaging academy and helping us scale the walls of the ivory tower and bridge the gap between town and gown. For a long time, I was one of those tech enthusiasts making those arguments in sociology, driven in large part by the fact that as an editor of numerous blogs with very large audiences, I found that there was an incredible opportunity to bring sociological ideas to a much wider set of publics than would otherwise be the case. And at that time, it felt to me like social media opened up an exciting world that could transform the prospects of sociology. If only we could get to grips with what exactly these social platforms are and what it would mean to use them effectively. And this has been the focus of my work for a long time, and it led to this collaboration in which Lambros and I have sought to understand public's platforms and the relationships between them. The fact I deleted my personal Twitter account in the later stages of writing the book perhaps speaks volumes about what we found in the process. And I'm now extremely critical of the tech enthusiasm I once advocated, not just because it fails to represent what social platforms actually are, but that it fails to present them in a way that can allow us to practically get to grips with their effective use. In the book, we explore how social platforms are imagined within higher education as powerful dissemination engines, which will ensure our ideas get from in here to out there, so that they can circulate ever more widely to ever more vast audiences. And we argue that this view of social media actually introduces new status hierarchies into the academy. It intensifies already overwhelming workloads, and it increases the likelihood staff will be subject to racist and sexist abuse, which is depressingly pervasive on these platforms. But I should make clear, this isn't an argument against social media. It's an attempt to be realistic about what social platforms are and the opportunities and challenges that they open up for the practice of public sociology. Because the thrust of our book is not that these are new technologies which we must adapt to or be left behind, but rather these are becoming mainstream features of social life. And public sociology that is orientated towards social life outside the academy needs to have a rigorous, thorough, and practical understanding of how to use these platforms, warts and all. There are tremendous opportunities here, but realizing them requires that public sociology deepens its engagement with questions of technology and media, something which has traditionally been absent from these debates, as well as rejecting the orthodox ways of imagining social media in higher education. It means we're going to have to think deeply about how the sociology of publics is being transformed by the proliferation of platforms, as well as what this means for our practice. And in the book, we argue this must be a collective rather than an individual undertaking, involving building projects together that will last with time and have an identity, rather than the fleeting character of individual use. We argue that we need to find ways of sharing the burdens of platforms and negotiating the pathological dynamics which arise from their design. And that most of all, it entails being clear about what we take publics to be and what it means to be orientated towards them.
Thank you very much, Mark. Does the co-author Lambros want to say something now?
Yeah, sure. So following what Mark said, I would like to offer a glimpse into how our book attempts to rethink the public in public sociology. So the notion of the public in public sociology. And in our book, we approach the notion of the public as a platform for intellectual, cultural, and political life. And relatedly, we see public sociology as a technology for being public as well as making publics. So the word public then is understood in our book as something that we are, an identity, something that we do, an activity, and something that we make, namely a space for being public, becoming civic, and remaking public space. To offer some examples that do justice to what we mean by all this, I wanted to start with a more theoretical one before I move to a more practical one. So the more theoretical example comes from the work of Jamaican thinker Sylvia Wynter, who calls, and her concept of provision ground ideology. And alluding to the ground allotted for growing food in the Caribbean, Wynter shows how that ground was used as a terrain for cultural practices of dancing, chanting, and drumming, as a way of creating a grounded sense of community and public associational life. Such a performative conception of public space and what to do with it to create social life helps us rethink the public as a community we actively create and participate in through what we do, rather than an audience that we simply address. So publicness here becomes sociability and community, not the property of the public sociologist who publicly disseminates their scholarship. While there is nothing wrong with that, there is an inherent sense of distance and a hierarchical relationship between the public and the sociologist. with the public sociologist essentially identified as bringing and doing sociology to publics rather than making sociology in public. Here's where our second and more practical example comes into play as a public sociology project, namely Free University Brighton. Free University Brighton is a cooperative project which offers university-level education in the humanities and social sciences for free. From its inception, it was thought of as a public sociology project that happens in public to promote free, publicly available education, including sociology, and therefore empower community and rejuvenate public life. At Free University Brighton, public sociology then becomes not just something that is simply taught and learned, but a way of thinking that created a community education project. So building on this example, our notion of the public and our aspirations for public sociology is for it to function as what we call a technology or platform for being public and making publicness in public.
Thank you very much indeed, Lambros and Mark. And their book is to be published in the next few months, but a discount is still available. So I will now then move to the next book, which we wish to launch, written by the co-editor of the series, Neil McLaughlin. The title of which is Eurig Fromm and Global Public Sociology, and it is due to be published again in the next few months. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, John. So my name is Neil McLaughlin, and I teach at McMaster University in Canada. I'm very excited about this series and the books that we just heard of. My book talks about Eurig Fromm, who is one of the major early examples of a public sociologist. We often think of Du Bois or C. Wright Mills or David Riesman, seminal figures, important figures. But Fromm sold more books, was more globally engaged, and in some ways provided the template for the public sociologists in the 40s and 50s and early 60s before the debate actually happened. He was an influence on Paulo Freire, so it really connects to the education book. He was a part of critical theory, and so the book tells the story of this forgotten history of Fromm's public sociology. Starts with Escape from Freedom, an analysis of Nazism and right-wing populism, unfortunately, something that's very relevant today. It theorizes sociologically why he became public and why his reputation as a public sociologist has been forgotten. It tells a story of how he was politically active in anti-war and socialist activism, and theorizes the tension between doing professional sociology and this kind of engaged public sociology. We also try and reformulate Fromm's ideas for today as they're being revived. Unfortunately, it's one of those unfortunate things, Donald Trump's narcissism and the rise of right-wing populism, the crisis of democracy that we face today requires a public social psychology that Fromm helps provide a window into. So that's my book, but I'm really excited about the larger series. And one of the other books that will be coming out in 2022 is from Myra Heard, who teaches at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, not Queen's in Belfast. And she's a very important feminist theorist and sociologist of science. And she has a book coming out on the public sociology of waste. So we have a couple of books from the UK, a couple of books from Canada. We're very excited about seeing proposals. You can give us a shout, John and I, we'd love to see proposals from the global South, from North America, and we love the series to be a place where there's a dialogue about public sociology and the engagement that we can do in a global form. So thank you so much for for your attention, and I'm really excited about this project. And
I should add again that there is a discount on Neil's book, and it is due in the next few months. So if you are interested in the series, you might wish to look at our website, hosted by Bristol University Press, or contact either myself or Neil, and offer a proposal. All proposals are sent out for review, and as Neil said, we think that the theme of the series, public sociology and engagement between sociology and its many publics, engagement on relevant topical issues that speak to the social condition today. It's a very, very exciting project, and we encourage you to contact us with proposals.